Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 10th, 2022, and I'm recording this on December 9th, 2022. I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant because the market, as you'll see by the change in values from 6 months ago, the market's always moving and changing. So you know what we were talking about and what was actually going on. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Those are the two lists that I use for this particular video. They give you a good swath of comics that were hot or trending in the market back then. And what we're really doing here is trying to see what happened, why those comics were hot back then, what values they were going for, and how they've responded in the market since, whether or not you should have been patient, which books do better or worse than others in terms of holding value, even over this short 6-month period. This week we got 19 books to talk about between the two lists, so let's dig in and see what we can learn, because if you've been paying attention, there's been a pretty strong pattern, particularly this year, in terms of patience pays off. But let's see what happened this week. First up, we have Beavis and Butthead, number 25. This is one of the harder to find later issues of this run. And it hit the list though because the movie trailer dropped, and I remember thinking when we talked about this 6 months ago, I was like, "There's a movie," and I think the movie's already come and gone, and I don't think it made many waves. But back then, it caused this later issue to jump up to $40+. Now it'll cost you $30, but we're talking about really about 2 sales because this is actually pretty hard to find. I think there's only been 2 sales that weren't part of a set of numerous issues, and only 1 listing that's not part of a set of numerous issues. So there's not many of these out here, but so it didn't turn into the trap I predicted, but it definitely turned into an I'll be back. Next up, we have Predator number 1 from 1989, and this basically hit the list because the trailer for the Prey movie dropped, which was our newest version of Predator. Back then, raw copies were going for $60, 9.8 hit 700. Another solid I'll be back. Movie came and went. Book has trended back down if you were just patient. 20 to 70 for raw copies, depending on condition. But most of the copies are going 40, 50-ish kind of range, so definitely down a little bit. 9.8, 525, 625 as opposed to that 700 back then. So, like I said, and I'll be back, very typical for a book related to a movie that has come and gone. Next, we have Sandman number 13, first appearance of Lady Constantine. We got the Sandman trailer, so a lot of trailer-related stuff that's not even DC or Marvel this week, and that she was playing a fairly prominent role in that trailer. Back then, raw copies jumped up to $35, 9.8 hit 275. That was still a $10 to $40 book on the raw side, but most part a little cheaper than it was. 9.8, 20 to 250, so another kind of down, I'll be back. This is a series that I still haven't watched. I need to get started on. Next, we have Sandman number 5, which is the first cameo appearance of Merv Pumpkinhead. And this hit the list because he wasn't in the trailer, but we got news that Mark Hamill was providing the voice. Back then, raw copies 35, 9.8 actually 335, so big value there on a 9.8. Now raw copies will cost you $10 to $20, 9.8, 140 to 200. So this has actually dropped back considerably more. I don't think he played a really big role in this first season, maybe more so in the second, but it turned into a bit of a trap, at least following the first season. With that, we're going to move away from option TV stuff for a minute. We're going to talk about a comic related to a game, and this is Fortnite versus, Fortnite Marvel Zero War, the Marco Turini variant, and basically this came with a game code. We've seen this with the DC one, Fortnite books. They go for pretty good value when it first comes out. Raw copies were going for 40 to 50 back then. It was supposedly a UK exclusive, but Midtown actually had it, and now it's a $10 to $20 book. So this one definitely turned into a trap. You can get this cover not easily. There's not a ton of them out there, but they're not going for big value, and there are a few. So next, we're going to move into our covers specifically, and we got Poison Ivy number 1, the Frank Cho one at 50. So back then, this one was going for about ratio at 50 to $60, which usually means it's going to end up below ratio, maybe even way below ratio. This one's kind of held. You can get it for 25, you can get it for 75, and pretty much anywhere in between. So there's a pretty wide range on sales here. Interestingly enough, there's a few raw sales that are higher than like the lowest 9.8 sales, which are 60 to 130. So I kind of just threw this in the steady, kind of I'll be back. I mean, it's all in the same range. Or, well, the range is actually bigger, but it's all, there's a lot of sales in the same range. It's definitely been worth it, though, to, just be patient and look for the right deal on this one. Not too hard to get, but just a very, people are still willing to pay quite a bit for it, but not consistently, I guess, is the best way to put it. Next, we have DC Pride #1, the Jim Bartell foil variant. I originally had this written down as a 1 in 50. Then it was like everything I was finding said it was a 1 in 25. I'm not 100% sure there. But back then it was going for 40 to 50. And now it's going for 20 to 40. And interestingly enough, another one where some of the 9.8 sales are around the price of raw sales. 9.842, 9.852. And then the 9.8 also went for 180, which is definitely an outlier here. But overall, this is definitely another down and I'll be back and borderline trap, but a lot of the sales are in the 30-40 range as opposed to the 20-30. So on those raw side. Next on the list for the second week in a row is Amazing Spider-Man, the movie #1, the photo variant with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. And this had to do with the Andrew Garfield signing like we talked about last week at CGC. We were talking about kind of mid-grade stuff going for 70. Well, higher grade stuff by the second week we're going for 125. Now it's a $20 to $70 book. Definitely a trap in terms of if you were just chasing the book. If you got the signature, then it's not a trap. Like the signed books go for good value. You didn't really lose money. Actually, I don't know what he charged for the signature, so I can't say you didn't lose money, but definitely not. But if you were just trying to buy this book, it was definitely worth waiting till this went away. The signing thing went away. Our last cover of the week is Amazing Spider-Man #3, the Hiskuri Yusugi. I have no idea that I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. 1 in 100. This is the first cover appearance of Sakura Spider. This is a character that had appeared in manga in Japan first, but then it appeared in a book we'll talk about later. But this was the first cover appearance in America. Raw copies were on this 1 in 100. We're going 150 to 200. Still going 125 to 200 on the raw side, 9.8 for 300. So another steady, I'll be back kind of thing. You can definitely get a little better deal, but it's definitely right in that same range. But it sets up our next book, which is Deadpool Black, White, and Blood #4, which is her first appearance in a Western comic. Back then, this was going for $10, 9.852. So not a lot of value here. There was a bunch of sales. There was a big increase in sales. They kind of put it on the list, but not a ton of value here. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, 9.840 to 60. So another kind of steady, in this case, worth it because of where the values were before. So this one, I don't know that we're going to get much out of. I haven't noticed her in the Into the Spider-Verse event yet, and maybe I just missed her, but I haven't noticed her in that yet. And who knows if we'll get her into the Across the Spider-Verse movie, but these weren't huge values to begin with, and they've kind of held kind of where they were at. Our last comic buzz here related is Web of Spider-Man #36, first appearance of Tombstone. And this was right around, like I said, we talked about Amazing Spider-Man #3. This was the beginning of this new ASM run that's been going on that I've been severely disappointed by, but that's just my opinion. And Tombstone was the main villain in this early part of the series, so that's why he was hitting the list. Raw copies 30 to 50. 9.2 went for 100 plus. Now a raw copy will cost you 15 to 25. And 9.6s are selling 60 to 120. There was actually a 9.2, I think, that went for like 80. But overall, you can see that it's down. It turned into a bit of a trap. There was also a 9.2 that went for like 30. So yeah, it definitely turned into a bit of a trap here if you were chasing it, just based on him being the villain of that first storyline. Next, we're gonna move back into the movie spec side of things with DC first, and that is All-Star Squadron #25, the first appearance of Nuklin, who becomes Atom Smasher, and this had to do with the Black Adam trailer. Another trailer that week. Big week for trailers, apparently. Raw copies were $25 back then. 9.8 hit $425. $424, I think, actually, was the sale. Now, even though the movie just recently came out, it's a $10 to $25 book on the raw side. 9.8, $225, $325. So definitely a down, and I'll be back. And my guess is it's going to continue to go down as we move even further away from the Black Adam movie. And I know there's a lot of rumors that maybe we're not going to get any more Black Adam. So we'll see where things go. James Gunn is definitely going to is revamping things. We'll see. And James Gunn I trust, but yeah, we'll see what happens to some of these projects that were already going. I know he's wanting to try to make a cohesive unit, so we'll see what happens. Next, we have Star Wars number 17. Also a book on the list for the second week in a row. So our second repeat book. We've talked about first appearance of Quinlan Voss. He was name dropped in in an episode of Obi-Wan a week or so ago from when it was hitting the list at this point. By this point, it was up to $75 raw. 9.8 hit 500, which I think was what prompted it to be on the list again. Now, a raw copy will cost you $15 to $60, and there wasn't any real recent 9.8 sales. So this definitely turned into a trap, as most of those sales were more in the $30 range, within that $15 to $60 sweep. So definitely not as nearly as much interest as when this character's name dropped back in the show. What we got? 6 more books to go, MCU-wise. We got Witches number 1. You're going to go be like, what? This is the first team-up of Satana, Jennifer Kale, and Topaz as witches. I don't know if there was really a team name here. But this hit the list because it was going for $6. And you're like, what? And basically there was a bunch of sales at basically cover or a little more because Key Collector mentioned it as a potential spec book. So but the people bought it, so then he put it on that it was hot. This is one of those where I'm like, where they kind of, this is when I feel like they sort of manipulate the list. I don't necessarily feel like it very often, but when you have a book that only hits the list because they mentioned it, that's clearly, obviously, that he's kind of playing both sides. But anyway, now it's a $5 to $20 book, so it's actually held some value. I mean, I called it a trap just because I thought it was silly that they put it on there. I don't think there's any actual news or rumors that any of these characters are coming anytime soon, but it is actually continuing to hold a little bit of value. 9.8, one sale, mind you, went for $200. So this has been steady worth it to this point. We'll see what happens here if we get any of these characters. I know they tried Satana and that show that was on Hulu that just crashed and burned, a year and a half ago, maybe? So we'll see. Next, we have something we know we are getting, which is Incredible Hulk number 449, first appearance of the Thunderbolts. Back then there was rumors. Now we know we're getting Thunderbolts. We kind of know who the team is going to be. We know that we've had a recast for General Ross. Back then, 9.8s were hitting $650, $700 for this book that I had back in the 90s, and I probably sold in a stack of a whole bunch of stuff for very cheap. Oh well. Raw copies now are going from $50 to $150, 9.8 down to $450, $650. So definitely it's turned into an I'll be back, even though we've gotten additional news, which seems to actually be sort of the pattern with a lot of these Marvel books, at least in 22, is the initial news peak is even higher than trailers or further news, or even the movie in some cases. That on some of the peak on some of these books. So that initial is higher than anything. Next, we have Thunderbolts number 128. This is Yelena Belova joining the Thunderbolts. Back then, we know she's going to be part of the team. Back then, raw copies were on 15 to 20. Now it's 5 to 20. You can argue against steady, but definitely on the I'll be back because you can get it on that $10 or $5 side if you're patient. 3 books to go. The cat is not happy with me because she's locked out of the room, if you can hear in the background. We got Marvel Comics Presents number 19, the first appearance of Damage Control. And this is because they were, I think the Ms. Marvel show had just started or was just about to start, and we knew we were getting Damage Control as part of that show. Raw copies were going for 10 to 15. Now it's a 1 to 15. With most of the sales under the $10 mark. 9.8, 150, but that's only 2 sales, both of which right at 150, mind you. So this has turned into a down, and I'll be back. And yeah, now a ton of interest in Damage Control. And they were just sort of there to provide some sort of antagonist, I guess, for Ms. Marvel, but they didn't really do much in that show. Next, we have all new Marvel Now, .1. Number 1, the first full appearance of Kamala Khan, the new Miss Marvel back then in 2014. Raw copies were going for $200 back then. This I wonder about. I wasn't checking timing them as closely on some of their averages. I feel like this might have been slightly high for an average, but we'll see. As you'll see by the values now, but 9.8 hit 950. Now raw copies are 30 to 75, 9.8, 550 to 700. So this definitely has turned into a bit of a trap as we moved away from the show. And if you really if that raw copy was accurate, you're talking really almost dumpster fire territory for that, if that 200 was accurate. And then our last book of the week is Miss Marvel #1, her first solo series. Back then, raw copies were going for 80, 9.8 going for 235. Now it's a $50 to $90 book on the raw side. So, you know, in that same range, but definitely more sales below 80 than above. 9.8 going for 1 to 200. So this turned into an I'll be back. Didn't back up near as much as her first appearance, but also didn't have as far to back up. So that is this week's list. Once again, no books. This is several weeks in a row we've had no books actually go up in value. We had a few hold steady, but nothing really going up in value. Again, with the vast majority going down to some degree or the other. We didn't have the dumpster fires we had last week, but we definitely had some books dropping back. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.